Hi, everybody, and thanks for listening again to Master English with Tim, the podcast where Tim helps you to learn English in depth and detail, and without ever hurrying. I'm Tim, English teacher since 2005, native speaker from the United States, world traveler, polyglot, writer of English learning resources, and, of course, podcaster. In this week's episode, I am going to teach you some words that will help you to express your thoughts in a way that have a very strong impact on whoever is listening to you. Basically, I am going to tell you pairs of words that name qualities or characteristics that something can have, for example, intelligence or poverty. The first word in each pair will express an ordinary idea, an ordinary strength of idea, while the second word will express the same idea but in a more extreme way. Let's start with a pair of words that you probably already know. I already mentioned the word intelligence, which is a person's ability to understand things. A much stronger word is genius. That's Genius. A genius is a person whose intelligence is so strong that we can't compare it at all to that of ordinary people. I can think of two famous geniuses off the top of my head, Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein. The word genius is usually used to talk about a person, but we can also use it to talk about a decision or a solution to a problem that is very smart. For example, once a friend of mine was driving home from a very long trip to another state, and his family's car stopped working far away from any city or mechanic. The problem was so bad that they had to stop the car, and after they did that, they opened the hood of the car. The hood of the car, by the way, is that kind of big door that opens not to the side, but instead up, and it's in the front of the car. Under the hood, you can find the engine and a bunch of other stuff I don't understand. Anyways, my friend saw that an important pipe or tube was broken and that liquid was flowing out of it. He touched the liquid carefully and noticed that it wasn't hot, so he took out a pen, then took out the inside part of the pen, the part that you use to write, and then he took the empty pen and he placed it between the two broken parts of the pipe in the car, connecting them. After that, my friend and his family drove home without any problem. If you ask me, his solution was complete and total genius. You probably noticed that I put a couple of words before our target word genius in order to make it sound even stronger. Those three words were complete and total. We also have another word in English which does the same thing, which makes strong words sound even stronger. That word is utter. That's written U-T-T-E-R. So you could say that my friend's solution with the pen was utter genius. Now, let me tell you something about the word utter that will help you to remember it. The word utter is very similar to the word outer. You can find, for example, the planet Uranus in the outer part of our solar system. So the outer part of something is not the ordinary central part of something. The outer part is instead the most extreme part of something. And the similar sounding word utter has a similar meaning. We use utter to make an already strong word sound even stronger. For example, utter genius, like I said before. So let's combine utter with some more strong words. Imagine that you went to the bus station, and instead of finding an organized, orderly line of people, you found people without tickets fighting to get on the bus without paying. You found strange people coming into the bus station and leaving with other people's bags, and you found the police completely unable to control the situation. In this case, you could say that what you saw was utter confusion. An even more interesting word that expresses the idea of utter confusion is bedlam. That's B-E-D-L-A-M. Bedlam just means really bad confusion. This word has an interesting etymology or word history. The word bedlam comes from the word Bethlehem, which is the small town where Jesus was born according to the Bible. Many centuries after Jesus was born, and in a different part of the world, in fact, in London in the 1400s. In Europe in general, and in Britain specifically, it was often religious people who built and managed hospitals that cared for the mentally ill, and these religious people often named their hospitals after saints and holy people. In this case, they named their hospital in honor of Mary of Bethlehem, the mother of Jesus. That sounds nice and peaceful maybe, but the reality was that large numbers of crazy people that really didn't know how to help all the living. This word has an interesting etymology or word history. The word Bedlam comes from the word Bethlehem, which is the small town where Jesus was born according to the Bible. Many centuries after Jesus was born, and in a different part of the world, in fact, in London in the 1400s, there was a hospital for the mentally ill, or I guess at the time they probably just called them crazy people, that was named in honor of Mary of Bethlehem, the mother of Jesus. In Europe in general, and in Britain specifically, it was often religious people who built and managed hospitals that cared for the mentally ill, and these religious people named their hospitals after saints and holy people. Naming your hospital after Mary maybe sounds nice and peaceful, but the reality was that large numbers of crazy people lived there together and caused utter chaos, utter confusion, because honestly, probably at the time, no one knew how to take care of them properly. Over time, the hospital became strongly associated with utter chaos, and also, gradually, people began to pronounce the word Bethlehem in a faster, shorter, lazier way, and the final pronunciation was shortened from Bethlehem to Bedlam. The hospital has been mostly forgotten, but the word Bedlam is still in our language. So if you want to talk about utter confusion or utter chaos, you can also say utter bedlam. It's actually a more interesting way to express the idea. By the way, as a substitute teacher, I can tell you that in some classrooms, there totally was utter bedlam. People yelling, making and launching paper airplanes, drawing mean pictures of each other, pushing desks or even tables down, and so on. So yeah, utter bedlam. By the way, I mentioned a second ago that bedlam is a lazy pronunciation of Bethlehem. Let's look at the word lazy. A more extreme word for talking about laziness is sloth, S-L-O-T-H. You may know the word sloth from internet memes. A sloth is a very lazy animal that lives in trees and does nothing all day and all night. If you don't know which animal I'm talking about, take a look at it in Google image search. Sloth also has another related meaning. That related meaning is extreme laziness, the kind where, for example, you stay in bed all day and do nothing. If you're completely healthy but stay in bed all day for a few weeks and ask people to carry you to the bathroom, then you could say that that is utter sloth. And another example of utter sloth might be, for example, you're in bed and you're too lazy to take your iPad and write in the video that you want to watch, so someone else does it for you. So yeah, extreme sloth, utter sloth. Let's come back, though, for a moment to the Mary of Bethlehem home for crazy people in late medieval or early modern England. Probably that place was not just chaotic, but also dirty, with dirty floors and beds that hadn't been changed in a long time. A stronger word for dirty is filthy. That's F-I-L-T-H-Y, filthy. I remember living some years ago in the city of Marseille in southern France, and even though I really loved that city, I can say that in some places in the center or downtown, the streets were really filthy. Once a week, a special vehicle would come down the streets and clean the streets with what looked like two giant circular toothbrushes and soap, and for a couple of days the streets were cleaner, but soon they were filthy again. There was trash juice on the street, pieces of trash, food, and so on. It was pretty bad. Something similar, but worse, happened in New York City way back in 1968, when the trash collectors refused to work because their pay was too low. For 9 days, the trash piled up in the streets, and people began to live in utter filth. There's a word that's even stronger than filth, though. That word is squalor. Let me say it slowly. Squalor. Squalor. That's written S-Q-U-A-L-O-R. Utter squalor means that there's trash on the streets, maybe there's the smell of, the shit of people and animals, and maybe even a dead body or two. I love this word, squalor. Let's move on to our next pair of words. The first word in the pair is disgust. Disgust is the feeling or emotion that you have when, for example, you look on the floor of your kitchen and see that there are big brown cockroaches running around on the floor. A much stronger word for the same feeling is revulsion. R-E-V-U-L-S-I-O-N. I remember feeling revulsion once in the lunchroom of a place where I worked many years ago. The lunchroom was a small place with a television and a fridge that I never used. One time, though, I opened the fridge, and what I saw inside caused me utter revulsion. There were clear bottles of sports drink in there where the drinks themselves had gotten so old that they had turned completely black. There was mold inside the bottles, and even the mold was dead. There was a bag of cheap bread, too, and the bread was so old that it had turned to liquid inside of the bag, which fortunately was very tightly closed. So yeah, utter revulsion. I helped everyone out and threw everything away, but honestly, nobody thanked me. Let's move to a more positive pair of words. Let's start with wealthy. W-E-A-L-T-H-Y. If you are wealthy, then you are rich. Wealthy and rich mean the same thing. Wealth is the form that is a noun. Wealth can mean all of the nice and expensive things that a rich person owns, like their big bank account or their Lamborghini. If you say that someone lives in wealth, that just means that the person lives really well, in great comfort, and near all of the nice things that they have. The next and stronger word in this pair is opulence. That's O-P-U-L-E-N-C-E. You could say that Roman emperors lived in opulence. Although, if you think about it, ordinary people in modern times probably live longer than most Roman emperors did. So, if someone lives in utter opulence, that means that they have maybe several helicopters, a beautiful private boat, some airplanes just for racing for fun, a huge swimming pool with seawater in it, and of course, a very, very big house. And maybe they even have a second swimming pool with seawater that has a shark or an octopus or something in it just for the fun of watching it. Let's move on to the antonyms of wealth and opulence. The antonym of wealth is poverty. Poverty is the fact or situation of living with very little money or very few resources. If you live in poverty, your house or apartment is small and cold in the winter and hot in the summer. If you live in poverty, probably you eat food that isn't fresh or healthy. A much stronger word for poverty is destitution. If you live in destitution, or worse, utter destitution, you have only a few dollars in the bank, if you have a bank account at all, and probably you sleep on the ground outside and ask strangers for food and money. If you live in utter destitution, maybe you don't even have any shoes on your feet. Sorry, one small note, I forgot to spell destitution. That's D-E-S-T-I-T-U-T-I-O-N. Again, destitution. If before you lived in utter destitution and suddenly won a $1 billion lottery, you would feel not just happiness, you would feel utter bliss or utter ecstasy. Bliss, that's B-L-I-S-S, and ecstasy, E-C-S-T-A-S-Y. So again, utter bliss, utter ecstasy. Of course, you don't have to see such a big change in your life in order to feel utter bliss or utter ecstasy. If you haven't taken a shower for a week and all your clothes don't just smell bad, they feel bad on your skin, and you then take a shower, you are certain afterwards to feel utter bliss or utter ecstasy. Actually, embarrassingly enough, something like this happened to me some years ago while I was walking alone across France, which took me about 9 weeks. It was about 1,600 kilometers or 1,000 miles. Pretty awesome time. Actually, the best time of my life. I can explain. I was at the beginning of my walk, and it was still cold. So if I washed my clothes by hand and then carried them with me, the clothes wouldn't dry. So I had to wait a long time to wash my clothes. a really long time. And I can tell you that when I was finally able to wash and dry my clothes, and I put my clean clothes back on me for the first time, I was in utter ecstasy or utter bliss. Utter bliss or utter ecstasy is the best a person can possibly feel. There is nothing better. I like to end on a positive note, so I will leave you with those amazing feelings of utter bliss and utter ecstasy until next Monday. Thank you for listening.